Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Erica Austin. I'm here with Dogwise, and I am joined today by Annie Phenix, who is the author of the best-selling book, Positive Training for Aggressive and Reactive Dogs. And Annie, we're so excited to have you here so that we can talk about this book. This is such a hot topic right now in the dog training world. So we're really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Anyone who's tuning in, let us know that you're watching by leaving a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. Also, we want to know, do you have this book? Have you started reading it? Did you just pick it up at the Aggression in Dogs conference last week? Are you looking forward to buying it? We have sold out of this book 3 times. So we got a bunch of copies of this book, and then we did an e-newsletter. We sent out newsletters every week, and we sent out a newsletter and it sold out immediately. So we did not even advertise it on social media until this week because we got more copies in and then we had more back orders to fill, which that is exactly the kind of problem we want to have. We love selling out of books, and this is such a fantastic book. Can you talk a little bit, Annie, about how you decided to write this book? How did this book come about?
Yeah, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. I love Dogwise. I have probably bought every book through the years of Dogwise. I spent a small fortune, but well worth it because I love the books. That we're on the same page, definitely, the books and the videos. And I've always been a big fan, so I'm honored to be here. This book almost didn't come about. I wrote The Midnight Dog Walkers in 2016. It was bought by Fox Chapel. Authors have very little control with traditionally published books versus self-published. And I wasn't going to write another book. I had retired from the industry for 5 years, burnout, which is so common in our industry, unfortunately. And I was happy. I was cooking. I was seeing my husband more often. I was walking my own dogs. We were moving between Colorado and Utah, and we had a property there that I was taking care of, and I had horses there. And I was done. I was pretty much done. And it was August of 2021, so COVID had hit, when the publisher reached out to me and said, could you write a second edition of the Midnight Dog Walkers? It'll be 80% the same book, 20% new. But we're not going to call it the Midnight Dog Walkers, and it'll have a new cover. But it'll be easy. And it's never easy. And I almost said no.
That's what they always say. They always say, and now that I'm on the publishing side, they say it's going to be easy. It's not. It's such a complicated relationship and a back and forth of trying to make sure the product is right. So I can attest also, it's not easy on our end as the publisher either.
Yeah, and especially this book, they did make it look like the Midnight Dog Walkers with an enormous amount of photographs and artwork, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with the publisher, actually, at the end of the day. But I didn't want to do the Midnight Dog Walkers again, especially if they're not going to call it that. And that only means something to people, and this was their point. If you have a reactive dog, then you probably understand what Midnight Dog Walker is because you're walking to avoid all the other dogs.
Yes.
But if you don't have one, if you have all these other behavior issues, which I wanted to talk about, because this book, even though it says positive training for aggressive and reactive dogs, it's way beyond that. It's step-by-step. They're into step-by-step a lot, the publisher, for all of the major concerns we hear as trainers and behaviorists, and even some scientific study about what the most common reactivity is still way up there, and separation anxiety is way up there. But I did decide to write it at the very last minute. I was not going to, because I'm like, this is too much work, and it was. It's been 3 years of work, and you don't make a lot of money on books. You just don't. I mean, you have to be a New York Times bestseller to really to do anything, but I didn't do it for the money. I did it because the same reason I always write is I love dogs and I defend dogs and I advocate for dogs. And it's the people, the dog owners, who I write to. Like I wrote for Dogster for many years, online community and magazine. And I'm not writing, I mean, I love that other trainers like the work and they help. They made the Midnight Dog Walkers kind of an underground cult because they would sell it with their classes and stuff. And trainers have been wonderfully receptive of this book, and I'm very grateful for that. They're the ones, I think, who are sharing it. And there's 17 trainers in here and behaviors from around the world that I interviewed. But it's for dog owners. So that's why I did it, labor of love. And I'm very glad I did it because this book has changed my life, and I never expected that. You know, I'm like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm done. I'm retiring again. Wrong. I started consulting again with owners, mostly online because of COVID, and have been enjoying it. And it's because of what I've learned from my colleagues and the connectedness that I have with these professionals that was lacking, and it's been lacking in the industry. And you can get it when you go to conferences for that little 1 day to 3 days, But then everybody goes back home and we're so busy and tired, we're exhausted. It's
Yes.
a hard job to work with animals. You know, you don't stay in contact generally. And so what I learned in interviewing these people for over a year, incredible minds. One, I learned from them. I learned new things from them, which I always love learning new ways to help dogs. But when I sat back and reflected, it's that I realized I chose kind people that are not keyboard warriors. They're too busy, first of all, to helping dogs and doing their work. As we say, they have their head down and they're working, although some of them are quite big names and some aren't. They're nice. They're nice online, and that's important to me. I didn't kind of realize that, you know, but I know that I didn't. If I've seen people fight and be mean to other trainers, mean girls, they're not.
Oh, yes.
They're not in the book. And just because someone's not in the book doesn't mean they did that, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of excellent trainers that could have and should have been in the book. There was just so much space. So I'm not saying that if somebody's not in the book, it's because they're mean. I'm just saying that I realized when I had finished who I interviewed that they're all compassionate. They're all very force-free, and they're incredible education. Some of their we listed their credentials in the back of the book. I originally had credentials and then the interview, and the credentials were often longer than the interview.
Oh my gosh.
But you just keep learning.
Yes. And that's so important. It's so important to keep learning. And, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that about the conference. We just got back from the Aggression in Dogs conference. We're headed to the APDT conference next week. So we just have this 1.5 weeks in between, and then we're headed to PPG in a couple of weeks after that. So conferences are so important. They're a great opportunity to share information, but it also can be difficult when you do come back and then you lose that sense of community. So I'm glad that you found that in this book. You mentioned that you had retired due to burnout, which you said is so common in this industry. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then, you know, because I do think it is common in this industry, and we do get frustrated as trainers, and it feels like we're fighting an uphill battle and it's just a drop in the ocean of the tide is against us. So can you speak to your experience on that and kind of how you overcame that, or if you have advice for people who are in this field who might be experiencing burnout?
Yeah. Well, I feel so strongly about it because I know so many trainers who have left, or they just disappear one day. They don't make an announcement. They're just gone. And I hate to see that, but I completely understand why, because I did leave as well. And I've worked in behavior. Like, I was always interested in behavior versus sports stuff. And I did nose work. There's some sports that I think are phenomenal as long as the dog is happy. But my focus was behavior, and let's help the dog get relief from whatever it's stressing it, and help that relationship between the dog and the owner mend itself. So when you're working with behavior, there's a lot of heartache. There can be, and even if you can help the dog and keep it in that home and solve it or resolve the situation for the dog, there's so many that we can't help. There's so many that are just, put to sleep. Whether they need to be, and not every dog can be saved. I write about my own behavior euthanasia, so I'm not saying that every dog can be saved, but it's easy to get rid of the dog if it doesn't fit in your life. Because that's our society. It's just, I'm getting a new car, I'm getting a new TV, I'm getting a new dog. This one isn't, and we put so much expectations on it. So the expectations on the dog that the humans put on it is hard for us as the trainers and the person kind of speaking up for the dog, saying, please don't let your children pull the dog's ears and tails and sit on your dog and ride it like a horse. Please stop annoying little dogs and putting it on TikTok and thinking it's cute. It's not, you're stressing the animal. And we're animal welfare advocates, and I don't know that trainers necessarily see themselves like frontline animal, like rescue, and I come out of rescue, and shelter workers, but we are. Because if we can't talk fast enough or reach the owner in a way fast enough, they're either going to go to an aversive trainer because they sell a good game and lots of marketing and false advertising while harming the animal. They shut down the animal really fast and break that bond, which I am firmly against. But it's quick, and we're a quick society. My dog's lived 10 years, 12 years. Lucky if you have a small dog and might live to 15 or 16. So I want to bring us back to joy and love and happiness and why we got dogs in the first place. And that's part of the reason I think for burnout is that we as trainers are fighting against, hurry up, fix my dog. If you don't, I'll go somewhere else. And we know where they're going. Even at $1,000 a week for boot camp, please don't send your dog to 90% of the boot camps that are out there. So there's so much pressure if we don't get it right and quickly. We have to resolve these. And the way that counter conditioning and desensitizing has traditionally been used, and behaviorism, it's slow. It's like we say, it's like watching paint dry. versus take it down the street to Bob and he shocks the dog and the dog doesn't move a muscle. And that's on the training community that's allowed. It's not allowed in many countries anymore, but it's allowed in the United States still to shock a dog. And it's also on the owners. You know, I went to a Schutzen school. I was trained how to use a shock collar in Texas. And you have to put that thing on so damn tight. Like, how do you not, and it's got two evil looking prongs that are not just stems. How do you not know you're hurting your dog? That's on the owner, and I want owners to speak up and advocate for their dogs, but it's also on the training community and licensure and all of that this happens. So there's so much stress. To answer the question, there's so much stress on a trainer, and we are entrepreneurs. Most of us work for ourselves, particularly in the force-free versus the big franchises on the other side.
Absolutely.
You have to do everything. You have to be the lawyer, the CPA, the business owner, if you have staff, and you're taking care of dogs, which when I was training full-time, it's a physical job, not like handling the dog, just you're moving. And you're driving to people's houses, and I would do 5 miles a day without even thinking about it. It wasn't. Maybe I should get back into that kind of training, get fit again.
When I first started, I realized the first summer I did this full time, I was in the car more than I was with dogs. I would just drive to someone's house and then be there for an hour and then drive an hour to someone else's house. And I'm like, man, I worked, 12 hours today, but I spent 6 hours or 7 hours in the car. And that can be a challenge, because then that does lead to that burnout. And especially if you don't like driving, especially if you don't have great podcasts to listen to, then, it can be really challenging. So I'm grateful that you spoke to that. And again, that community, and there is so much on us. I mean, I think even now having to market ourselves, just like you said, the big franchises have whole teams that do that. And then all of us little independent trainers trying to make it on our own that only come together for a conference a couple of times a year. And then it feels like a very isolating profession at times.
And I will say, because of this book, because of my interactions with my colleagues, where is it? It's backwards. And that community and that sense of healing. I did not expect my own healing journey from the industry because of my colleagues. Because they saw me and I saw them, and we could relate on that. We have shared experiences. I and 25 other trainers started the Phenix Advocacy Center for R+ canine professionals, includes dog walkers and groomers. They just have to be force-free and adamantly so, and ethical trainers is what I say. We started it in February, and we very much built the structure of it. It's peer-to-peer support to help with the burnout issues and feeling isolation. We studied peer-to-peer. We've been trained in peer-to-peer support, which I had never heard of until February of last year. Many of the trainers who did help me start this, it's not just me by any stretch, did have training in peer-to-peer support. One of our board directors is master's in social work. The other one has worked with drug recovery foundations for 20 years. They all have more experience than I do. I'm just the front person of it. And we built it on Not One More Vet organization, and they helped us. I consider them a sister organization, and they saved us a lot of learning curve because they've been out there since 2015. And so we have this group for professionals, force-free. You can be a crossover, and in your past, many of us were. You just have to be committed to force-free today. I mean, it's not open to those who aren't in that. We're not debating tools there. We're there to help each other. We have almost 500 members, and it's just moving every single day, and it's safe. It feels safe. We want to keep it as safe as possible, as safe as anything is on the internet. And we're sharing our stories, and I think that's helping. I know it's helping because we're getting testimonials, and it's like we want to help you create a life you love, versus all the stress, all the trauma, and I call it secondary trauma when you see the infighting online, or secondary trauma. You know what's being done to dogs with the shock collars and calling it, and then you're told by some factions, just be nice. We can learn from everyone.
Right. Ignore the bad behavior you don't want to see in the humans. It's hard. It's hard to use positive reinforcement with humans when, you see that trauma being caused, and it's really challenging. So I'm glad you've created that community. Speaking of community, I want to make sure that our community who's tuned in knows that if you have questions for Annie, or if you have questions about the book, questions about aggression or reactivity, feel free to put them in the comments, and we will ask them during our interview here today. I have a question, Annie. So we shared on our social media a quote from your book, which is right in the very introduction of the book. But I wanted to talk about this very early on in the book. You say that don't set unrealistic expectations for your dogs. And you mentioned this a few minutes ago when you said that, people want things fixed immediately and, just get a new dog or try a new technique or try a new trainer. And can you speak a little bit to the immediate results and kind of how that sets us up for failure, not only as trainers and owners, but setting the dogs up for failure as well?
Yeah, very much so. It feels to me, and it has felt to me for some time, that, and COVID, I think, brought this home because so many people got dogs that had never had dogs before because they're at home and they felt like a perfect time. And I think a lot of it is comfort. The dog has an enormous ability to provide comfort for us, except when the relationship doesn't work, which it's not working the way that it traditionally has. It's not working for the dogs as well, which is why behaviorists are so busy and why I wrote this book, because dogs are very, very troubled. We're very troubled across the board. But when people began, I want people to back it up, owners, and say, why did I get a dog in the first place? What did I expect out of this living, sentient creature who has his own rules of living that are different from mine? Dogs do stuff that we don't do. We don't dig, we don't chew on raw bones. Hopefully we're not stibbing each other in the butt to say hello. We don't bark. They have specific needs that if we don't understand and allow them to be a dog and expect them to be like us or even better than us, don't complain, don't bark, don't chew, don't tear up my couch, don't pee in the house, be a perfect robot. That's putting so much pressure on a species that is not human and cannot speak. I say they don't have lobbyists, they don't have lawyers, they don't have anyone defending them other than, I really feel like, rescuer people, foster guardians who are adamant about no one hurting their dogs. Fear Free Pets is a great organization. Pet Professional Guild. There are groups of enforce-free trainers, but basically anyone can do anything they want to a dog, and it's very hard to prove. And there aren't a lot of consequences for harming a dog, including shocking a dog with a tool that, by the way, they're making millions and millions of dollars on the necks of dogs every single year. So if I want owners to say, before they get a dog and bring it to their house, ask why. Why am I getting this dog? What do I expect? Owners will tell me, because I ask on my incredibly long intake questionnaire, where are you on the level of frustration because it's all behavior problems. 1, I love this dog. I will move if I have to. I will change in my entire life for this dog. To 10, I'm done. I'm frustrated. Most people will say there are 1 or 2, and the 10s are the ones that, we need to remove the dog. We need to get it, if we can, rehome it if it hasn't bitten. But I think if people can just take a step back and before they ever bring a dog, why do I want it? Is it just to comfort me? That's what a lot of them will tell me on my questionnaire. I wanted the dog to comfort me. And they're good at that until they're not, until the living situation we put them in doesn't meet their needs. And then we still blame the dog. Why are you tearing up my couch when you have separation anxiety, when we bred you to be neurotic or whatever you want to call that behavior? And we have to say, are we really set in this time in our life for dogs? We get a ton of calls, nothing against parents, but we get a ton of calls from expectant parents. I'm going to have a baby in 6 months and my pit bull growls at everybody. Don't say pit bull, whatever dog, but I get a lot of those. I love pit bulls. Don't come for me. So to me, that's a lack of planning. Okay. If you have 9 months to know that a kid is coming, if you understand biology, right? So don't get a puppy when you're having a baby. They both need your attention. It's too much. And parents need to always supervise dogs and kids. No matter how great their kids are, they're still kids. That's not on them. That's on the parent. So it's that expectation of that perfect golden retriever, family dog. Everyone can crawl on it. He loves everybody. He loves all other dogs. That's a fantasy. And it's a false expectation. And I do talk, especially in the first couple of chapters of the book, what humans have done to dogs and what we bring to the table. This is not on dogs. They don't have a choice in our expectations. So I want people to have realistic expectations. Do you have the time? Are you going to have canine enrichment for that dog every single day? It's not enough to have them sleep in a crate while you're at work. They need mental stimulation. We talked about Pili Bianchi's new book about Chaser.
Yes.
You learned over 1,000 words. And I got to interview her yesterday. And what her father did is scientifically prove how brilliant, not just Chaser was, that all dogs have an ability to be that mentally stimulated. Doesn't have to be a brilliant border collie. And I think their lives can be just wasted if we get them to comfort us only. The comfort can go both ways, but like buying the best food and the best softest bed and they have shelter is not enough. They have to have the canine enrichment. They have to have physical activity. They have to have breed specific needs met. Like I have cattle dogs. Do I have cows? No, I have in the past. I don't have cattle dogs, but we work hard to keep their busy bodies engaged.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because yes, meeting their needs is so important. And Dogwise has a book, Canine Enrichment for the Real World, and I tell people all the time who are interested in that book, you're not going to learn about stuffing Kongs in that book. You're going to learn about all of the different categories of your dog's needs. And there's 14 categories in the book. This is not just mental stimulation, although that is important. And it's not just physical exercise, although that's important. There's health and there's nutrition and there's safety and there's security. And those two things are different. And there's a great explanation of why they're different and how that matters to your dog. And then species typical behaviors and also breed specific behaviors, giving your dog a job and not, shredding the couch is not the job that we're looking for. So I'm glad you spoke to that making sure that your expectations are realistic, not just for your lifestyle, but for the breed that you're bringing home and the lifestyle that you have and the lifestyle changes that might be coming up and how that does affect the behavior issues that we see in dogs. You interviewed several people for this book. And something I love so much about this book is that I can just flip through it and find an Ask the Expert section on several pages. And you said it was 15, 25. How many people did you interview?
16, I believe, total.
16. I love these interviews that are in here. I'm grateful that you included references if you want to read the full interview that didn't make the cut into the book for some of these. But this particular interview with Dr. Amy Pike is about veterinary behaviorists. So was there anything that you learned in this interview that surprised you or you felt like the average pet guardian or maybe even animal trainer or behaviorist didn't know? There seems to be a bit of a stigma around medicating dogs. And so what can people do to really benefit from that? Or what did you learn during these interviews that was really unique and new to you?
Yeah, I do think that's what separates this book because there are plenty of how-to books and, training specific books. You can get down to, very nuanced, sport books, certain behaviors like separation anxiety. And I wanted to talk about dogs in general and as a species and the most common behavior problems that owners report to us. And I knew I wanted to, and I learned from every expert, and they have they've all become friends, which I feel very fortunate about that. And I knew I wanted a veterinary behaviorist, if not more than one, because I think they're so specialized and brilliant. When you compare their training to anyone else's training, I mean, first they become veterinarians, which is a very hard bar to meet. And then they go on to become a veterinary behaviorist and all the years of study. To me, they're the psychiatrist of the dog world because they can prescribe medicine and do behavior. Like we can't obviously prescribe anything as trainers. And most veterinarians are not trained well in behavior. They're just not. Their focus is medicine. So I love veterinary behaviorists. There are, I think now 90 of them around the world, maybe 100. So not very many. They're hard to get into. And that's one reason I wanted to talk to Dr. Amy is like, how do people get to you? She's in Virginia. She's in Fairfax, Virginia. And she has a team on her staff, which I love, including trainers. And I wish they would. I wish veterinary behaviorists would have a whole team of trainers because there's a lot we can handle before we bump it up to a veterinary behaviorist when you get into the medicine and the veterinary end of it. And I think we work very well together most of the time, and we're natural allies in this. Veterinarians get angry at us if we practice medicine without a license or even suggest anything, and then we get angry at them or frustrated with them. Don't talk behavior because you're not trained in that. So I see a lot of symbiotic behavior that works well in a lot of cases. But from Dr. Amy, I love that she has trainers on staff, and she said something in an interview we did with her that she said that stuck with me. that if she has a dog that is 3 years or younger with behavior issues, she refers it to her trainers, the trainers on her staff. If it's 3 years and older, she wants to do medical testing. So like, because they have to go through adolescence and reach maturity. And we do see as trainers a lot of dogs between 12 and 24, 36 ages a month because their full personality is present and they're fully mature at that age, depending on, smaller dogs can take longer, etc. And
Right.
every is unique. So I thought that was really interesting. And I've shared that with other veterinarians. And I kind of always remember that when I'm talking to a client. How old is your dog? When did the behavior start? And I wish people would contact a trainer, particularly a behaviorist or someone experienced in behavior, when that little puppy is, is showing some concerns or some behavior that seems not healthy, and call then, and don't wait till the dog is 3 and practice all that time. So.
Yes, I worked with Dr. Amy Learn, who is a colleague of Dr. Pike's in Virginia when I lived there, and they're an entire team of trainers. And I went up and saw her clinic and got to see how it operated and meet the other trainers on her staff. And I highly recommend, if you're fortunate enough to have a veterinary behaviorist within 100 miles of you, trainers, in this industry, to be able to build that relationship and be able to have someone to refer to. And I think the same does go for your veterinarians. So many times we find that an animal that's exhibiting aggressive behavior is actually in pain. And sometimes we fix the pain and then the aggression significantly reduces or maybe even goes away. And so I think that being able to have that relationship where you're able to talk to the staff of a veterinary team or a clinic, or having that close relationship, is so helpful. And like you said, I think veterinary behaviorists have a wonderful ability to kind of be a crossover between no one jumping out of their lane, because they do have training in both areas of medicine and behavior as well. So
very impressive, and they are under attack for some reason by the aversive trainers. They really gets under their skin, and it just drives me crazy. And to me, it gets down to education. That
yes.
People who are attacking veterinary behaviors never in their million years could have even passed 1 year of veterinary school, in my opinion. So they're going after personally, when it's like, these people have dedicated their entire lives to helping animals, and they can operate on an animal and they can help a dog's mental status. And so it's absurd what they are going through. And it feels very targeted when I see it online, that it's a veterinary behaviorist. It's like, it's that anti-science, anti-intellectualism that drives me crazy. But they are amazing, and I have a lot of respect for veterinarians. Very hard job, we know, and also veterinary behaviors. They're the superstars.
They are superheroes. Once again, want to just open up the comments. If anyone has a question for Annie, feel free to leave it in the comments, and we'll ask it live and be able to discuss that here. Speaking of pain and how that can play into aggression in dogs and reactivity in dogs, you've spoken a bit about aversive tools, but you have an entire chapter in the book that's dedicated to what not to do in dog training. So especially specifically with aggressive dogs. But chapter 8 in your book is all about what not to do in the name of dog training. And I've got a couple of pages from the book here as well, that pages 172 and 173 in the book, if you've got it at home and you're following along, where you're talking specifically about punishment and aversive tools and the fallout that can occur from them. But in your mind, what is the most dangerous part of using these aversive tools and methods in dog training when we have aggression or reactivity cases presenting?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many things, but it really hurts my heart to think of a dog that has physical pain that maybe a veterinarian hasn't been able to suss out. Maybe it's soft tissue, maybe it's a heart problem, who knows, or the owner hasn't taken it to the vet. And so the dog is reacting from a starting place of pain and or fear. And then the human comes in and says, basically we're gaslighting them. You're not in pain. Shut up about it. Don't air snap at me. I'm the boss. That old dominance, outdated theory in the hierarchy, and do as I say because I'm the human and I pay the bills, versus taking a step back and saying, why is my dog suddenly air snapping at everybody? Why is he reactively lunging and screaming on leash when he didn't do that for the first 3 years of his life? Light bulb needs to go off. I need to get this dog to a veterinarian and rule out pain. A big study came out recently that said up to 80% of the time, up to 80%, their pain is involved when there's a behavior issue. So I even have on my intake form, if there's been a bite or an air snap, I am not going to be able to work with you until you go to a veterinarian and you check out everything, not just for your yearly shots.
Right.
You need to go talk to your veterinarian and say, my dog, his behavior has changed, and here's what I'm seeing. And veterinarians also need to listen to the owners, because the owners do know their dog the best. So that just breaks my heart that a dog, like I worked with a little golden retriever puppy years ago, and the owners sent it to me for puppy training. And the dog was, of course, brilliant and super sweet, but it peed constantly, like urgently. And so after like 2 days, I said, I think your dog has a UTI. I'm not a veterinarian, but this is abnormal. And she's not peeing to be a naughty dog. And they came and got her immediately, and she had a UTI. So we stopped training. She got treatment. She came back. She didn't do that anymore. A mindset of an owner who might say bad dog and spank it or rub their nose in it, God forbid, when the dog physically cannot stop peeing in the house. I mean, women have UTIs. We know it hurts.
Right.
It is a very painful situation. And to me, that happens over and over and over in a dog's lives. They're just trying to say, I'm uncomfortable. This is making me nervous. You're making me nervous. That guy's making me nervous. That dog's making me nervous. And we reflect it. It reflects back to us as I have a bad dog. I have a stubborn dog. I have a reactive dog. So to me, the most harmful thing is not being curious about the behavior. Why is my dog? Sarah Fisher's in the book. She does free work, and she's in the UK. And I got to meet her in August, by the way, and she's just as phenomenal in real life. And her question is why? She does off-leash free work and observes the dog and understands all the, like the ears have, I forgot how many different muscles in it. She could tell you, like 30 muscles. I mean, we just don't think about that. And so she can pinpoint a pain issue or a sensitivity issue through observation. And to me, that's the worst, is not being curious about why and not blaming the dog. Like, why have we gotten away with blaming a sentient being who cannot speak, who cannot say, you're scaring me right now? They do say it. They whisper it, as Shirak Patel says. They whisper, a trainer in Scotland. They whisper. They lick their lips. They get the whale eye. They put up they try to they put the paw up, and then we don't hear it. Owners don't hear it. And I think the industry has got to focus way more on canine communication first and foremost. Learn that first as an owner. Like, it should be required to pass the test before you ever bring a dog home, because then we don't honor the communication, and we're gaslighting them.
Absolutely, yes.
You're not.
Yes.
And then they go up. And I don't even like it called the ladder of aggression. It's the ladder of response. You not hearing me say that this is bothering me. And then to add punishment, that chapter talks about do not punish it. You're punishing a sentient being for expressing a need and seeing it as a need, and use your big human brain to figure out, how do I resolve this for this dog, versus how do I punish you enough that you're shut down and you shut up. I mean, that's just cruelty upon cruelty. I don't think dog owners do it on purpose. Trainers should know better. I will hold their feet to the fire. But dog owners, it's the human emotion. This dog is embarrassing me, or it's not what I thought it was going to be, or it's nipping the heels of my children, but it's a border collie, or it's a cattle dog. There's almost always a why. And I feel like it's our job to figure out the why as much as we can, and then to alleviate the stress for the dog, versus that's completely different than punishing and shutting the dog down.
Absolutely. And thank you for speaking to that. I think we've got a comment from Andra that when you're talking about holding the feet to the fire, sadly, people don't question trainers and ask why we're doing this. They feel like the trainer is the expert. And you mentioned at the very beginning, all of the trainers that you interviewed for this book, their credentials were a mile long. And it's not just about credentials. This is also about continued education. Like you said, the thing about credentials is that it shows that you're studying, and you have to have continued education units every year or every few years to be able to stay up to date on what's going on and what the most modern methods are and what the research is saying. being able to talk to other professionals and see what's working. And can we make this better? Can we make it less painful for the animals? Can we make it easier? The conversation that's happening about errorless learning right now is really fascinating. And I love that that is the direction that so many trainers go. But as Andrew said, if we have owners or dog guardians that are saying, well, I hired this trainer, so they're obviously the expert, but this is an unregulated industry. So where is that expertise coming from? And like you said, this goes back to the very beginning, our very first question about expectations and setting the expectations for the lifestyle that you have and the animal that you have. And as you were mentioning, not punishing out the communication of a need, and recognizing that these animals are sentient beings and they do have emotions, they do feel things. And like you said, it matters. It's not just that we're the boss and we're in charge and you have to listen to us because we pay the bills. We should move past that, I think. So I'm grateful that you dedicated an entire chapter to the avoiding the use of aversive techniques and tools, because I think that is so incredibly, incredibly crucial.
And it does fall on the owner. It starts and ends with the owner, who you hire. A lot of times owners Google trainer near me.
Mm-hmm.
Who's closest? Would you do that for your child's physician? Or somebody that you're taking advice from that it matters desperately to your life. So I encourage owners to be your dog's advocate at all times for everyone, including Uncle Bob, who throws your dog on the ground and because he saw it on somebody do it on television. Mm-hmm. I love what Dr. Laura Donaldson is doing. She's also in the book. She's brilliant. I take all of her courses on Thinkific because I learn it from her every single time. I mean, it's just incredible what she's doing now. Somatic body work to relieve stress in animals. But she is talking about no violence. Let's not have any violence involved in training. And it's violent to not let a person be who they are. It's human to human. That's been historically a huge problem with, not to get into politics, but white control is where white power is telling everyone else, don't be that. Don't be any different. Don't be this, don't be that. And I feel we do that to dogs. Don't be this, don't be that, don't be that. Just basically be a robot. Well, then you shouldn't probably have a dog. If that's what the expectation is. So I encourage owners to say, is this violent? Is putting a shock and not a stem and not a tap where the dog, I was trained on them, so don't come for me and say I'm not trained. That's one of their favorite complaints. I was trained and I saw dogs run through it. I will say it does not work 100% of the time. There's no guarantee it will work. Trainers at my school I went to were running behind the dog, cranking up the thing, and the dog is screaming and yelping, but still wanted to attack the dogs in our class like daily. So don't tell me that it's 100% guarantee. There is no 100% guarantee with a dog. But that's where it's going to change. I don't think it's going to change from our end down, at least anytime soon, in terms of shock collars and painful tools. Got to be the owners, and I hope owners are listening to conversations like this and reading the book, because it is for owners, to say you cannot do that to the veterinarian, to the groomer, to your husband, to your whatever, to your children. Don't let the dog sleep. Don't stick your hand in the food bowl. I mean, it's got to come from owners. I don't know how else we can reach them except we keep writing books.
Keep writing books, and I think the more people I talk to, and the more that I learn, and then of course as a social media marketing person, I really truly believe that the more people, the general public, are educated on canine body language, the faster change is going to come about. Because I think that when they can see it, when they can recognize the stress signals, then maybe you can't unsee it once you've learned how to identify it. Everyone in my life knows how to identify dog stress signals. And I was watching TV with my family not too long ago, and they're like, oh my gosh, the dog had a lick lip. I was like, yeah, there's probably a camera right in his face, but understanding that so that other people can see it and recognize it, because I think that, like you mentioned before, the marketing is so powerful. And I am glad that you said the false advertising is so powerful that, those aren't stress signals. It's just a tap. It's just a snap. It's just a whatever. And we know scientifically that punishment only works if it's aversive, if it's something that the animal doesn't want to have happen again. And so I think that it is difficult. And that's, I think, where a lot of that burnout comes from too, is trying to advocate and trying to educate pet guardians and help people to understand when it sometimes feels like we're fighting a religious battle of who's right and who's wrong. And I think once people can see for themselves, this thing that this trainer is doing to my dog or with my dog, I feel uncomfortable. Please, owners and trainers and guardians and anyone out there, listen to that feeling inside of you when you feel uncomfortable, but also being able to recognize those signals for yourself and realize that your dog feels uncomfortable. We've got a comment from Melanie saying, advocating for my reactive dog has been one of the most difficult things I've done, but my dog and I are both safer when I advocate for him strongly, even if I come off as rude and pushy to others. Well done, Melanie. That is such a hard thing to do. Luckily, hopefully that behavior is getting reinforced by your feeling of safety, you and your dog, because it's so important. It's so necessary.
And it falls a lot on women too, because we are the primary caretakers of the kids and the dog. And it can feel very difficult, bitchy, rude, depending on how you were raised. And I was from the South, so, be a lady at all times. I missed that part of my education. It can feel rude just to say, don't harm my dog. And I think how rude it is to harm the dog. It's kind of like at Christmas time, people will say, you see memes now, thank God, that says, instead of telling all the children to stay away from Uncle Ted because he's creepy, don't invite Uncle Ted into your house.
Yes.
It feels rude because we were told family blood is thicker than water. Well, not if they're hurting your kids. They're not welcome. And anyone who hurts my dog is not welcome in my life. And I am very vocal about it. I take Mace with me everywhere I go with my dogs. I live in a pretty safe little town. But it's the off-leash owners who allow their dogs to rush mine, and mine are excellent with other dogs, better than I am about a dog rushing them. But I haven't always had that dog. Sometimes you have the reactive dog, and you still have a right to walk that dog peacefully. And I have the Mace, not for the dog. I have the Mace for the owners who are going to yell at me. That's what they tend to do. Your dog's reactive. Well, your dog just rushed my dog in a very rude way. Or do we have a discussion about this on the street corner? So that's what I mean about advocacy. So I'm very thank you for that owner who said that she stood up. And I think you're standing up for yourself as well. I started rescuing dogs because dogs were, I say they are often the first indication of love in many dysfunctional families is the dog. And that's why some of us become such strong advocates. And that was my case. My dog Cricket followed my bus to school. Like my family was, and I've talked about this, they're very dysfunctional. I don't speak to them anymore and haven't for 20 years. They didn't say love. We were so dysfunctional. Like, no hugs. No, I love you. No, I got your back. It's like the strong will survive and the meanest will survive. But the dog showed me that love, and so that's why I defend them so strongly. But I also, when I rescued 400 dogs over 10 years in Texas, I think I was rescuing myself over and over and over, because just like a child in a dysfunctional family, you have no choice where you land. And dogs have no choice where they land. They can have the best family in the world. The only thing that made me cry in my own book was I wrote two different dogs, a normal day for the same dog, but two different families. And the first family is what I would call terrible, uninformed dog-owning family, which is unfortunately typical. Not terrible. They're not informed, and they're not seeing the dog's needs, and the dog's doing the best he can. And the second one, where the family is dog-centered. And the dog, makes sure it's fed, make sure it gets walked. The dog's needs are completely ignored in the first one. And I mean, I cry every time I read that, because I know that's the reality of too many dogs. And if you speak up, if you bark, you bite, you're going to be in big trouble. We're trying to change that.
Yes. Andra also said that as an owner of reactive dogs, the public needs to not judge the owner and the dog, respect the owner when he or she says, don't approach. I don't care if your dog is friendly. And of course we run into that a lot. And you mentioned this in the book as well. Like sometimes management is important, but it's also can be really challenging, so I'm grateful for all the comments. Again, if you've got more questions, feel free to toss them in. We love hearing from all of you, and we're glad that you're going to be able to be a part of this conversation and part of this community, and know that we are here for you. All of us with I have a reactive dog. I have a reactive border collie. And I like to say he's not reactive. He is overreactive in my opinion. He is reacting exactly the right amount for him. We've talked a little bit about, what you should not do in the name of training. I want to also bring some attention to things that you can do. So one of the things that I really love about this book is that you offer practical solutions, some step-by-step things. This book is not a how-to manual, but it most certainly is. So sorry, I was reading some comments. We have a couple of questions. Melanie, what was the name of the foundation, Annie, that you worked for?
The Phenix Advocacy Center for dog trainers.
Phenix Advocacy Center. And then Diane wants to know if Sarah Fisher is appearing anytime soon. Do you know where she's going to be speaking or?
Yes, I do know. She is in the UK most of the time, so I don't know what she has going on between now and Christmas, but I can tell you that Sarah Fisher and I, and Laura Donaldson and I, will soon be doing a live, I think an hour and a half seminar through PuppyWorks in January. And that'll be announced. Yeah, and that goes out to you have to be a subscriber to get it. And I love what PuppyWorks does. And so because they're in the book, they're in the chapter about reactivity, which if you have a reactive dog, that's the meat of the book for you. And I learned so much from them. I mean, that's why, to look out in the world, because I had retired for 5 years, and say, well, what's new? Who, what, where, when, and why? Because I am trained as a journalist. And what is new since counter conditioning, since I wrote the Midnight Dog Walkers, which was heavy on counter conditioning, because that was very in use back then, and I still use it. It's just not my number one go-to at all, because it's different owners, and there's so much more that we can do, and it doesn't provide relief for the dog. It provides relief from the explosion that we have to witness of the dog overreacting. It doesn't solve the problem, the emotional problem.
Absolutely. So I wanted to draw attention to a couple of the pages that you've got in the book. You talk about the check-in, and you give really great, clear steps on how to actually train that with your dog. One of my favorite things that I've taught lots of dogs how to do is the take a breath behavior. And I absolutely love training this to dogs. I think the best thing about this behavior is that when I cue it for my dog, I have to go, we're breathing together, and that's such a wonderful relief to be able to do that. I also love that you include the Look at That game, which is by Leslie McDevitt. She has several books. Her Control Unleashed games have pattern games in them, and the Look at That game is a fantastic resource. But this is really different from that desensitizing counter conditioning that you were just talking about, and kind of how things have changed, like you said, since you retired the first time. So being able to have some practical skills to do, this book is so easily written for anyone to be able to just jump right in and do. But do you have a favorite technique, a thing that you love the most about training reactive or aggressive dogs?
Yes, I will say two things. One is, before you even get into the Look at That, or like, I don't make dogs lie down and look at me. We've done that in years past. It's get on your mat and don't move a muscle. That doesn't help the dog. And if you want your dog to go to a mat, and like, I had a border collie who loved to work with reactive dogs. He loved his mat. He didn't care what the other dog was doing. In fact, it ended up being I couldn't get him off the mat. He's like, no, I get cookies. I'm staying here all day. Thank you. That's completely different than he's choosing to go to the mat and he can get up anytime he wants, versus you go lay down for 2 hours while we have dinner. It's completely different. So before you start using training, and yes, I do say we have to train dogs, it's just that we put too much focus on the training and the science, and not so much on the living and the existing and being happy for dogs, and us happy with them. Before you do a sit, a down, a stay, a Look at That, you have to resolve the behavior issue first for the dog. So if they're noise phobic, and many dogs are, and they're barking at any time the mailman comes by, and they're just over threshold and all the stress hormones, that's not the time. You gotta solve that for the dog before you do any of these skills. I've always been a fan of Look at That. It does give the dog something else to do, or engage, disengage. It gives the owner something that they could do besides everybody just sitting there staring at a dog coming. I always say this is the hardest thing for dogs, walking this way. It gives them something. You turn, but mostly I'm like, don't put the dog in the situation once you know. And then people are like, well, how am I supposed to walk my dog? Well, do you need to walk your dog? Like a lot of dogs are not enjoying the dog. It's stress after stress. And that was the most blowback I got from the Midnight Dog Walkers, was not the behavior euthanasia story, which was very painful for me. It was don't walk your dog. I have a whole chapter on that. And that's the training industry. We said, walk your dog. You're a terrible owner. My God, they need an hour every day. No, they need to be with you. They need to have a relationship with you, and they need to sniff. They can sniff in your own yard, and you can hide stuff. That's if you need to, like go find it. Way more important than that 30, 45-minute walk. And now we have to tell owners that, sorry, we begged you to walk your dog. But if they're reactive and they're facing a trigger every single walk, you are not helping the dog. They can never have a time to calm down. So I would say.
We did an interview with Nikki French. She wrote a book called Stop Walking Your Dog. And she has also had a lot of blowback with a lot of people saying, what? I can't walk my dog. And the summary of that book and that interview is stop walking your dog, but do this also instead, supplemental. It's not just you're done, you don't have to walk your dog anymore. There's more to it than that. So we've got a lot of comments of people saying that Look at That, which is abbreviated to LAT, Look at That, is one of our favorite games. And we've got a comment saying giving the owner a feeling of control does help. This is a good element, makes the owner part of the process and gives them a feeling of control and being involved. Absolutely. I think that when you're working with your dog, it's so powerful to know that you're doing this together and not just telling your dog to do something or having there be some feedback there, which is absolutely wonderful. Diane said, joined late. Can I have the name of the book again? Of course, Diane, thank you for asking. The book is Positive Training for Aggressive and Reactive Dogs. It is, of course, available at DogWise and would encourage you guys to check that out. Annie and I also put together a little recommended reading list for you. Some of the other books that we've talked about today during our conversation. Melena De Martini wrote Separation Anxiety Protocols, and she is interviewed in the book. There are also some BAT techniques, which is behavior adjustment training, in the books. In this book, you talk about BAT and you talk about some Control Unleashed games. Leslie McDevitt, she has a book, as well as the Canine Enrichment for the Real World. We mentioned that a little bit earlier. That's a deep dive into learning how to meet your dog's needs and not just stuffing Kongs and making shred boxes, although those are very important. But if you want to take a deep dive, we recommend that book. And then also Meet Your Dog by Kim Brophy. You interview Kim in this book as well. She has maybe 2 interviews. She's in here a little she's a fantastic expert to ask. So in the Ask the Expert section, she appears in this book. And then you recommended Rocket Recall, Annie. How does Rocket Recall or Recall at all help with aggressive dogs? Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
That's by Lisa Lau Wagner, one of my favorite trainers, and she and her husband Brad Wagner they're kind of the recall king and queen of the industry, and they have cold nose college, and they're just fantastic human beings. And I did want them in the book actually, and I just ran out of space because I say that a recall is one of the I think I do 5 skills or maybe 3 life skills that I train all my dogs, and the number 1 is a recall. Off-leash recall. And they walk through in a positive reinforcement way how to get that connectedness. Like it's an invisible connection. The leash is a pretend degree of control, and same with the shock collar. My dog comes back to me because we love each other, and he trusts me. To get a dog to come off of a smell, off of the female, off of a deer trail, if we could see what they smell, we would never ask them to come back and come off. It's too much. It's too much. And they do. Many dogs do. Many dogs have terrible recalls, especially those that are off leash and running and run into our leash dogs. But I love Lisa's book because it is all positive reinforcement and it is a life-saving skill. There are some things that we absolutely must train. And when I train a recall, I don't start with, here, back up here, because I do talk about how to teach and a step-by-step how to teach it. I start with that connection and with that bond. And years ago, we called it whiplash turn. I don't know if that's still in vogue, where you say the dog's name and it turns its head. And I have dogs with big ears. My dogs have huge ears, and I love shepherd ears. So I say, Finn Cooper, what I'm asking is for them to go, what are we going to do now? It's not stay. It's like, yes, good. What fun are we going to have? So the
Absolutely.
recall, beginning of recall is their name. You know, stop. Hey, Finn, I know you're really involved with that smell, but we got to go. There's something, I'm protecting your life. We got to go right now. And my dogs they've always had a really, really good recall, but I also reinforce it and I train it. I don't just think, oh, I did that 5 minutes and now they have it down, because we are asking a lot for a dog to recall.
Absolutely. I compare it a lot when I talk to my clients, my human clients, to if you were watching a really great TV show and it just got to the climax part and I came in and just took the remote and turned off the TV and said, pay attention to me. Or if I didn't take the remote and I said, hey, over here, I have something really important that I need to tell you right now. And it's like, yeah, I'll be there in just a minute. And I see my dog when he's sniffing something or he's on the trail, that's a big ask to ask your dog to leave that thing that's the most interesting thing in their life right now and come running. So love that book and love that can be a really important tool when you're working with reactive and aggressive dogs, is just that first step that you mentioned, getting their attention on you, and not in a punishment way of look at me or else. It's look at me because we're about to do something fun together. So I'm glad you brought that up. And then you told me, yes, I heard yesterday in your wonderful interview that this book, For the Love of Dog, is your new favorite dog book ever. Is that true?
I absolutely love it. I got to read an early copy of it before and I saw the illustrations. It's just a work of art. It's so much more than, it's not a training book. It's a philosophy book, because of who Pili Bianchi is and who her father was, who was a psychology professor. And of course he trained Chaser, the border collie, to learn those 1,000+ words, including verb tenses and different names for different objects. And Pili's just a remarkable person. I just adore her. And her kindness and genuineness came out in the book, and she worked with Callum Heath, who we also interviewed yesterday on my channel, and people can see that on my Facebook page. He's like 30 and an incredible illustrator, and his illustrations on the cover and throughout the book, and it's just really, it's a work of art. It's a love letter, I think, to her father and Chaser, and they do the canine behavior. They walk through. He does illustrations in a beautiful way. That is very simple and accessible. And it's like, even if you don't have a dog, I think people should get this for Christmas, because it's a very moving book. It's unlike anything I've ever read. And I'm buying it for everyone for Christmas, whether they have a dog or not. It's just beautiful. The illustrations and her words. I mean, it's hard for me to read her book without crying, because it's just so, she says everything I've always felt about a dog, which is they are mythical creatures. And they should be on a pedestal. They shouldn't be the dog.
Oh, absolutely. And I do. The illustrations are beautiful. We're going to be interviewing this author in a couple of months, so stay tuned for that, everyone who's tuned in today. But Dogwise is carrying this book, so we as a small business appreciate when you choose to purchase your books from us. All of the books that you see on the screen and the ones we talked about today are available at dogwise.com. So we encourage you to get those. We have a few people who commented and said, I have a few of them, but I'm just adding the others. And Debbie said, I have every one of those books. Way to go, Debbie. The more books, the better is what we think. So if you haven't gotten a copy of Annie's book, which is, again, one more time, Positive Training for Aggressive and Reactive Dogs, we do encourage you to head over to Dogwise and pick that up. We have that available at Dogwise as well. And Annie, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Please grab your copy of the book if you haven't gotten it yet. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Big fan of Dogwise.